Alrighty, so we're back for part two. I'm very strongly considering labeling the Cynic Reacts to Jack in the Box because I don't know. Again, it's I guess you could argue criticism that I've gotten quite often that I can be quite jaded, right? And I think in that instance, J-Hope and I would clash because I do think he's a lot more optimistic than I am, and not again that he's just that. Again, we've seen him discuss heavier topics, you know, be a little bit more cynical, be a little bit more jaded, but I do think he does try to be as optimistic as he can be, and I'm very much not like that, so it's interesting seeing the clashes, I guess, in our ideas and how we express ourselves and all of that. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, I think discourse is healthy. I'm a very big believer in that, at least that discourse is healthy. Discourse, even with ideas you may not agree with, can be very helpful and beneficial, and maybe it can even teach you things. You know, I'm not above learning from people who may differ from me in terms of how they view the world and their ideas on the world. It's just, yeah, sometimes you're gonna disagree with people and it's fine. We won't die. I didn't die. J-Hope didn't die. We're fine. We're okay. We're living. And I still like him as a person and as an artist and all of that, you know, just because he expresses ideas that I may not necessarily agree with, or perspectives that I just may not necessarily see, doesn't mean I can't enjoy him and still enjoy the music, you know. But anyways, all of that heaviness aside, again, like I said, I'm interested to see if that discussion carries through to the latter half of the album. And we're gonna start with Music Box. I assume this is kind of an interlude, that's the word, because it's quite short. So, and interludes usually do reflect a change within albums, whether it's in sound or discussion. So I'm very interested to see what that change is going to be. Let's get into it. 3, 2, 1. Again, with the kind of static sound we got in the intro. Maybe it's a Music Box now. It was a TV in the intro. Okay, there's a lot of breathing going on. So oh, and I said in the first half, I have a bit of a cold, so excuse me throughout this reaction. I don't know, just woke up sick today for some reason. It's kind of eerie. I'll talk about it more when this finishes. Okay, so I said this in my first half, if you've seen that reaction. I feel as though his content, and by content I mean the lyrics and the discussion going on in the music, has been quite light, whereas I think the instrumentals have been quite gritty, heavy, very hip-hop heavy, very kind of old school hip-hop heavy, with maybe Equality Sign being the exception to that rule. But I would argue Pandora's Box and Stop were kind of fit that criteria, if you will. And even lyrically, Equal Sign definitely was a lot more lighthearted. I do think the instrumental was definitely a lot lighter. This, however, I did think we might have been going to a lighter place, especially because of the song Equal Sign was. This is very eerie, right? And I think this is a departure from specifically the gritty hip-hop grunge sound we've been getting. I think this is very eerie. That's the vibe I've been getting, and very dark. Kind of stereotypically horror, right? Especially with the sounds of the music box being contrasted with, again, there was breathing at points, the kind of intense beat we had going on. So I don't know, are we getting eerie? Is that the vibe? Is that the place we're going to? I don't know. As I said in the intro, this is J-Hope. He does what he wants in his music, so I don't know. Maybe it'll be all sunshine and rainbows from here. Maybe he's gonna be in his horror movie bag. Who knows? Alrighty, so the next song is What If. No thoughts with this one, just ready to dive in and see what the change, if there is a change, is in the album. Let's get into it. 3, 2, 1. Okay, come on, piano. This seems to be a kind of lighter sound. Ooh. okay. Okay, so is this the change? Oh, interesting. So I'm only a few seconds in. Maybe Jay will be like, no, girl, you got the wrong idea. However, so again, I touched on it a little bit when I was talking about my differences in opinions of the ones J-Hope's expressed in the song so far, right? I do think he tends to be, again, it's his whole shtick, it's his whole brand, right? And kind of the person that he is from what we've seen at the very least. He's a very optimistic man, very hopeful man, and he kind of makes it his point to try and spread that message as much as he can. But here, we're kind of seeing, not doubt, because again, J-Hope is a person. I'm reminded of this, I think it was like a Run episode or something from years ago where he and Namjoon touched on this, where he was like, J-Hope's still a person at the end of the day. He's not just dimensional, excuse me. He's not just the optimistic, happy guy. That's unrealistic and I think unfair to expect of him to just be boxed into that one aspect of his personality, because he obviously has other emotions. He gets angry, he gets sad, he gets frustrated, sometimes you see him being indifferent and apathetic and so many other emotions that I haven't listed, and it's not fair. And him asking himself, and I do think obviously with the group and BTS's and the size they've gotten to, there might be that pressure, right, to be that super happy and optimistic guy. And I think he's kind of asking himself like, hey, you know, I don't want to say, is this really you? Because again, I don't think it's fair even to himself. And maybe this is him trying to confront that it's not really fair to himself that he's only the happy, optimistic guy, and he's not almost allowed to have other emotions and express himself in other ways. But I think it's more so that how long can you just be the happy, optimistic guy? Like, how long is it fair to yourself to just be that person? But okay, all right, okay, come on, what if? You have me intrigued. Again, the instrumental's fire. I think this is kind of the pinnacle of like angsty J-Hope. I feel as though maybe in more, I haven't heard more in a while, so maybe I'm just remembering what it sounds like. Maybe more this level of angst, but I think this is like the angstiest we've heard him so far on this album. And considering the nature of the conversation, it's not really that surprising, I would say. And again, you know, we're kind of back to that old school-ish hip-hop sound in the instrumental. Hey. This is interesting. Is he speaking from the perspective, because again, I think you could look at this as maybe two J-Hopes, right? The J-Hope that's like the supposedly super happy one and has no issues and then super optimistic, and then the more cynical, jaded, pessimistic J-Hope that's like, why are you, it's kind of giving again, I think is where they do this, where specifically I think Yoongi does it in kind of the bridge of the song, where he's like, why are you complaining? Like, you have money, you have fame, you have probably millions actually of adoring fans. Everyone knows you, everyone loves you. You talk about loving yourself. Like, what's the issue? What do you have to complain about, right? And I think you could look at it that way, or maybe people who are being critical of J-Hope, right? The outside world and all of that, a lot of criticism, maybe not even criticism, I guess. A lot of bad faith criticism, maybe, I would say, that maybe BTS and him get, where people are like, oh, but you're rich and you're famous and so many people love you. Again, similar ideas to if this was a cynical J-Hope. Why are you upset? Why are you complaining? Like, what do you have to struggle with? Like, what are you doing? Alright, okay, cool, cool, cool. Okay, he's rapping very intensely. I'm trying to read the lyrics. I like this piano in the back. Oh, interesting. Ooh, okay. Okay, interesting. Oh, that last portion. Okay, so I think at that point, right, he'd been speaking more about not abstract concepts. I don't think that's the right word. More internal likings, right? Passion, vision, dreams, hopes, those kind of internal feelings, aspirations, and whatnot. But then he got not very, but he got more into the physical realm with cars, money. I think he mentioned a house, nothing in general. And I think this is the most maybe that we've heard him be doubtful maybe ever in his music. I don't know if there probably are kind of similar conversations he's had in other songs, and maybe I'm just referencing Jack in the Box itself right now, but I don't know if we've ever heard him be this doubtful, I guess is the right word. And yeah, I think doubtful. I don't want to say cynical. I think it's this is a very like doubt focused song. We're seeing kind of into his mind what he lacked, those parts of himself, and kind of parts that kind of makes him J-Hope, like the persona. He even says it in the song, the persona that is J-Hope. What then? Would he lose his fans? Would he lose his fame? Would he lose his money? Would he even lose himself? Because again, this is, I think, again, I don't know J-Hope, obviously, but I think a lot of this, even maybe you could argue exaggerated for, you know, BTS and the world. I do think he is, from what we've seen, just an optimistic person in general. So what if he loses that huge component of itself? What would he be left with? Even looking outside of the material possessions, like as an individual, as a person, as the person he is, what would he be left with if those parts of his personality weren't there anymore, right? I think, is this maybe the most doubtful we've heard him? Maybe. Again, probably other songs, especially probably songs within BTS's discography where they have similar conversations, but it's interesting seeing him touch on this, especially in such a, so far, quite hopeful album, quite light-hearted, optimistic album. Seeing him kind of delve into this part of himself and his thinking is quite interesting, and I'm very intrigued to see if this will carry through, because like I said, usually when there's an interlude, there's always a change, there's a shift, whether that's within the content of the song, within the instrument. There is, like 9 times out of 10 out of albums I've listened to, at the very least, there's a shift, and a noticeable one. So I don't know if we're getting a more jaded, pessimistic J-Hope in the second portion, if What If is, you know, an indication, but we'll see. Yeah, I am sick. My eyes are like watering. Jesus. Anyways, so I think Safety Zone was another song my friend was really into, if I'm remembering correctly. So very excited. Again, interested to see if that kind of doubtfulness, maybe cynical, maybe jaded J-Hope is going to make another appearance. Let's see. Let's get into it. 3, 2, 1. Ooh, are we gonna be in our R&B bag? Let's go.
20대를 바치며 무궁무진한 삶을 살고 있어 다 보란 듯 응답하지만 날 돌아보란 듯 커지는 이면 세상은 빠르게 변하고 그 순간 다르게 괴로워 아구는 없.
I say this all the time. I think one of my favorite parts of hip-hop is storytelling. I really enjoy the way rappers can weave narratives in you know, even just a few bars. I think it's so incredibly impressive, and this style in particular already is one of my favorites. A kind of more laid back storytelling with the instrumental. Even just the way he's rapping is quite, right now at least, relaxed for J-Hope. So okay, this is okay, all right, okay, cool, safety zone, I see you.
내 20대를 바치며 무궁무진한 삶을 살고 있어 다 보란 듯 응답하지만 날 돌아보란 듯 커지는 이면 세상은 빠르게 변하고 그 순간 다르게 괴로워 아구는 없듯 내 삶이 적적해져가 Oh my gosh 마음 맞춰 살아가지만 삐걱달에서 나를 위해 외치는 듯해 Break a leg in my zone 도심 속 잘 맞춰 사람도 만나지만 교통정리가 안 된 차들처럼 이리 치고 저리 치곤 해 나 왜 없는데 어디 가면 있는데 길 맞춰 잘 보면 안전지대가 있던데 그래 의미 없이 팔만 불지 이가 마치 깡통 Porsche 나도 가고 싶은데 Where is the mindset 내 심리 속에서도 있기는 한 걸까 그 누군가는 나에게 아낌없이 줬을 터인데 잠시 돌이켜보기 위한 내 구루터기는 어딨나 어둠 속 안도의 한 줄기 빛은 어딜까 고즈넉한 home 아니면 저 먼 블루이가 Where's my safe joint 왼쪽 오른쪽 go straight What's my safe joint 이거 저거 or X 어둠 속 안도의 한 줄기 빛은 어딜까 고즈넉한 home 아니면 저 먼 블루이가 Where's my safe joint 왼쪽 오른쪽 go straight What's my safe joint 이거 저거 or X 믿어주는 사람들의 인물 그들도 등을 돌리며 차갑고 날 이끈 people 잘 생각해보면 두려워 필요 없는 사람도 털어놓을 수 없는 사명감 요즘은 사람보다 동물이 좋다라고 느껴 자멸감 임종을 앞둔 노을 같아 밤과 새벽을 달래준 light Where's the zone 근제도 피가는 night green zone But 이 길을 선택하는 순간 있기는 할까 나의 safe zone 어둠 속 안도의 한 줄기 빛은 어딜까 고즈넉한 home 아니면 저 먼 블루이가 Where's my safe zone 왼쪽 오른쪽 go straight What's my safe zone 이거 저거 or X 어둠 속 안도의 한 줄기 빛은 어딜까 고즈넉한 home 아니면 저 먼 블루이가 Where's my safe zone 왼쪽 오른쪽 go straight What's my safe zone or X.
I wonder who's doing the vocals in the background. They sound great. Whoever they are, they sound very good. Okay, I think that's the least I've like paused in this album listen so far. I was just very absorbed in this one. Like I think maybe out of all the songs thus far, this is the one that just kind of, I don't even know how to explain it, just forced me to sit there and listen, I guess. And it's not that I have thoughts, I have opinions and all of that to discuss, and yeah, but usually I will kind of, as you probably noticed by now, kind of pause and talk through ideas that spring up as I listen. But I don't know, this one, honestly, if this was in English, my eyes probably would have been closed and I would have just been listening to this one. Wow, okay, is this one of my favorites? I think this might be like a top 3. I still think Stop Right Now is still my favorite one on this album, and Pandora's Box might be second. This might be third, actually. Like I said, I'm a big fan of this kind of hip-hop, the more relaxed kind, the storytelling kind is just some of my favorite personally. And Safety Zone, yeah, yeah, okay, cool. So we did kind of get a return of that J-Hope, right? The doubtful one, the more pessimistic one, where he's like, I don't have anywhere to go right now. Like he said this one line, maybe I should have paused that. It broke my heart, but it was such a good line. Something about his life, I can't remember it right now, that his life feels like an enemy, something like that. That line, yeah, yeah, that shit hurted, but it hurt in the best way. It was such a good line. I wish I could remember the exact line right now. Probably one of my favorites in this entire song, but it's so I do think the distinction we've been getting after the interlude is, you know, the contrast between the optimistic happy J-Hope and the kind of more cynical jaded one, and the kind, not even just cynical and jaded, but I think there was definitely the song is quite sad. I think there's a sadness in Safety Zone, this feeling of loneliness as well that he touched on in this album. Excuse me, the song is quite prevalent, and I think it bleeds into the song. I feel as though this is one of those songs, even if you didn't know the lyrics, you can just kind of feel the sadness in the song, in his voice, the way he's rapping. Yeah, it's quite I think this is the first song I would really full out say it's sad. Like, this is, I think What If was more doubtful, if anything else. This one is just sad. The way he goes about explaining his loneliness. And another line I quite liked was the one where he was like, where's my green zone? And I think he was speaking about like natural disasters or something. I can't remember exactly. I quite like that line as well, to describe his kind of psychological and emotional state, that he just doesn't have a safe space to go to find during the fucking disaster that is his life. And that can be the human experience. I do think, and I don't think I've touched on it as much in other songs, and I probably should. I do think J-Hope has very, obviously a lot of us can't relate to him. You can't really relate to being a member of one of the biggest boy groups ever, right? But I do think there's a lot of relatability in his music, specifically this album, I would say. Like, I do think it is quite, I would argue so far it's a little bit more refined than Hope World was, which is to be expected. I think that's kind of just the process of being an artist. You would hope you get better and better and more refined as you go by, right? But I do think there's a lot of relatability, and I know that word gets overused a lot, especially in K-pop spaces. There's a lot of relatability in specifically the song, maybe for me more so than maybe other people just don't experience this. But as someone who is well versed in, you know, loneliness and all of that, and sometimes feeling like you don't have a place to really go to help alleviate those feelings, I think this one maybe is the reason why I like it so much as well, because I think out of the songs thus far, this one feels I can connect to this one the most, I would say, so far. And I think that's part of the reason why I enjoy it so much, even outside of the way, again, that I spoke about, it's structured, and not it's structured, the way it sounds, the way he's rapping and all of that. I do think there's, for me personally, a lot of it that I can really understand where he's coming from, you know? Yeah, big fan of this solid top 3 song right here, I would say. We're at the end of the album. Why does this feel like it was so short? I pretty sure I covered all the songs on the album. I'm gonna be so annoyed with myself if I didn't. But this feels so short. Okay, what are my predictions for future? Either we're gonna get a J-Hope that's very uncertain about his future and where he's gonna go, or optimistic J-Hope is gonna come back and be like, hey, you know, I may not 100% know what's gonna happen in the future. I have good vibes. I'm optimistic. Let's go. I don't know. I think it's gonna be one of those two J-Hopes. Maybe I'm completely wrong. I don't know. Yeah, this has been quite a... Is J-Hope my favorite soloist from BTS? Maybe. I kind of think it's between him and Yoongi, not gonna lie. I do think they tend to, especially after now having listened to almost all of Jack in the Box, I do think they tend to have my favorite solo music, having listened to their projects, everyone's projects. I'm pretty sure I'm caught up on everyone's solo music. I do think they tend to have my favorite music. But anyways, the final song on the album. Let's get into it. 3, 2, 1.
Always.
Okay, that was, you already started relaxed, so I just, okay, out the gate.
Always. I needed to. When I said I do, 용기와 믿음, 긍정의 rhythm. Always I needed to. When I said I do.
So optimistic J-Hope is back. Got it. I think J-Hope was doubtful for like 2 songs, and then he was like, nah, this is... No, again, joking. Obviously, like I discussed in the other songs, it's not really fair to box him into one persona, but yeah, optimistic J-Hope is definitely back.
따워 지금 가장 걱정하고 따워 늘 스스로 주체가 되어 싸워 결국 내 맘은 멍투성이잖아 평소에 다른 옷 입대 try on 좋아하는 운전처럼 한번 순리대로 봐봐 내 피가 왜동겠어 왜 움직이겠어 결국 변화하고 영원한 건 없잖아 You know we know I know 강을 거슬러 오르는 연어가 될 수 없어 I need it too When I said I do 용기와 믿음 긍정의 rhythm Always I need it too When I said I do 미래를 여는 희망의 girl Future 그저 내 스스로 정할 style 단정할 style 없는 게 Future 다가올수록 무섭기도 홀로 버티기도
Yep, relatable content.
You must go with the flow 그저 흐르는 대로 가보자고 Future 필요해 보여 나에게도 용기와 믿음으로 희망의 girl Future
I do enjoy the kind of gospel elements in the song. Is it even a J-Hope song slash album if there's not some little like gospel vibe going on?
그저 내 스스로 정할 slow 단정할 slow 없는 게 다가올수록 무섭기도 홀로 버티기도 버거운 게 Man, you must go with the flow 흐르는 대로 가보자고 필요해 보여 나에게도 용기와 믿음으로 희망의 goal Future
Oh, is that it? Why does this feel like such a short song? Holy shit. I'm gonna be honest, not one of my favorites, but I understand its placement and necessity on this album. Again, especially after the more doubtful, pessimistic, sad, even J-Hope that we got. I do think it makes sense to have such an uplifting song. Not gonna lie. It might be my least favorite, to be completely honest. I do think I like Equal Sign more than Future, if I'm remembering correctly. Honestly, Equal Sign feels like a lifetime ago, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the biggest fan of Future. Again, but I will say it's probably the second most relatable song on this album for me, to be completely honest. I'm someone that's in university. I touched on it in the first part, right? I'm in university right now. I'm in my final year. I'm about to finish actually in a few weeks. I'll be completely finished with my undergrad. And thinking about the future is overwhelming. It's really overwhelming to think about what I would like to do and the plans I've started to set in motion, hopefully to get to where I want to get to in the future. But it's daunting. It's very scary, frankly, and intimidating sometimes to think about the future and what it holds. And I do think he touched on that quite a bit in the song, but I do think I do think J-Hope's a lot more optimistic than I am as a person. And maybe I could stand to be a little less jaded. You know, you can always learn from people that differ from you in those kinds of ways. And I do think, I think kind of where the relatability stops is with that hopefulness and all of that, because I'm not someone that can ever go with the flow. That is not in my personality. That's just not the person that I am. But I do think he's very much kind of talking to the listeners, but also to himself. I think there is, especially in the second half of the album, I do think there's a lot of kind of maybe talking to himself and being like, hey, it's okay to go with the flow, it's okay to not know what you're going to do. It's kind of giving Paradise now that I think about it. I love Paradise. I'm a big Paradise supremacist. It's one of my favorite songs ever from them. It's easily my favorite song on Love Yourself tier. But it's kind of giving me similar discussions that you had that were going on in Paradise, where, it's okay to not know what you're going to do in the future and maybe not try and don't stress about it, but more so, stressing about it isn't going to be helpful. It's not going to make you have more clarity on what the future is going to be like or the kind of future you want, right? So I think approach it with hopefulness rather than fear and intimidation and anxiety. I think he's trying to express that in the song, and that hopefulness may be a little bit more productive than feeling that anxiety and fear. And it's hard, you can't control those feelings. They kind of just happen, but you can, you know, control how you express them, your behaviors around them, and all of that. But as much as I'm not a big fan of the song sonically, I do appreciate the message of it, and it does make sense for the story that we've been going through in this album. But I have had a good time. I had a lot more to say than I think I anticipated going into this one, which I do appreciate a lot. I like I said, big fan of albums that inspire, or just music in general that inspires conversation and discourse, you know. But yeah, we did it. We finally listened to Jack in the Box. Damn. But yeah, this has been my reaction to Jack in the Box Part 2, and I'll see you in the next one.